Also, guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over the trades that we took today inside the Discord, as well as the game plan going into tomorrow. So, starting off for SPY, again, I did not trade SPY today, but I've just been going over this in every video just so you guys kind of get my outlook on where I think SPY is going and what to look for a trade. So, again, when we look at the weeklies today, told you guys going into today that the market was neutral because this 10 SMA crossed back below the 50 on the weeklies. That means there's no trend at the moment on the call side, and then obviously on the put side, we're also not crossed. So there's no trend in the market at the moment. Market's neutral. So pretty much all you have to do is look for a 0DT cross on either side of the premium. And if you just look at these other time frames on the weeklies, they are pretty bearish looking. If we look at the 4 hour, you can see what happened. Again, told you guys we hit that major resistance here, and we ended up rejecting, and we saw a little bit of a move down this morning, I believe, 9:30. Yeah, so off of open, we ended up dumping a little bit and chopping around. So really wasn't much going on. I don't think there was any opportunities to take a trade today. When it comes to SPY, when we look on the higher time frame outlook and we go to the monthly contracts, this is what we see. So if we pull up this daily chart again, I'm still pretty bullish on SPY as long as this daily 50 SMA holds. So again, we're starting to get a little pullback here, and this 50 SMA is going to be that major support area. I'm not going to be buying this dip at that 50, but that's just an area to watch for to see if we bounce, because the market has been going pretty much straight vertical, and eventually this 50 is going to break. So I'm not really going to be buying this dip. I wouldn't be playing this dip to buy. I would just be using this kind of as some bias where we might actually see a bounce from. And if we do start to break below that 50 and this 10 crosses below the 50 and this goes negative, then that will definitely signify that we're going to see some downside. And at that point, the weekly chart will probably cross on the puts and the market flips bearish. But until that happens, until this 50 SMA does get broken below and we go negative, I still favor upside. So how do we play this? Pretty much on the weekly chart now, it's important to know whether the calls end up crossing again or the puts actually going cross. So I'm actually going to pull up, I don't even know if I have the puts, to be honest, on my watch list, but I'm going to see if I do 650, 640s. Yeah, so 640 should be these ones right here. So when we flip to the put side, you can see we end up coming near this 50 SMA a few times, and if this chart did cross, you could probably catch a nice short move out of it into that 50 SMA on the monthly chart. So if we do cross here on the 30-minute, you look for shorts. It's very simple. If we cross on the 30-minute on the call side, you look for longs. So and then when we're in between this range, you just play the 0DT crosses. In my opinion, though, I wouldn't even trade the neutral market. I would just stick to trending markets. When we're neutral, just look for individual stocks and do that and just play those, because there's a lot of better setups to take when you don't just look at SPY completely. It's good to see what other stocks are doing, and there's definitely a lot of good setups out there to take rather than trying to catch a tiny cross in a neutral market. So for SPY, that's pretty much the plan. I mean, look for a cross on either side of the premium tomorrow, and that'll be that. Again, watch these 50 SMAs on the 30-minute, on the weeklies, because those are major pivot points. If we cross on the puts, like I said, focuses on shorts. If we cross on the call side, it focuses on the calls. If neither happen, then honestly, I wouldn't even trade SPY. I would just look for crosses on individual stocks, which I'm going to go over now. So the play that we did take today was TEM, or TEM, however you want to say it. But before we do, I'm trying to see which one I'm trying to replace here. I'm just gonna go over Intel real quick. Man, this was not the setup that I actually wanted. This is the wrong contract. But Intel is actually ripping after hours, because there was news of like some $2 billion investment some companies doing for Intel. So I know that chart's absolutely flying at the moment. I was eyeing this up this week, just because if we look here on these contracts, you can see what's going on here. This monthly chart is setting up for a cross. You can see 10 SMAs up. There's still a gap here. Again, this would probably take another day or two to cross, but with the news coming tomorrow, or with the news happening that it's up like 5% when I last checked, and this chart's probably going to go across, and we're probably going to see a move higher. With that much of a gap, 5%, I'm not really looking to take an entry on this, because it's already a significant move. And again, we're going to see how we open up, because let's say the move gives back a little bit and we see some sort of pullback in the morning, then maybe I'd look for an entry. But if it gaps up a lot, probably won't get an entry on it. But that's just kind of the thesis of what I was looking for Intel. It's a simple cross on the daily chart here. 10 going above the 50 on the monthlies signifies they're getting the monthly trend, and it'd be likely that Intel continues higher. Let me switch to TEM real quick, because this was a plus setup. I mean, this was such a clean setup. I'm glad we called this out today in the Discord. If we pull up the 1075s right here, if we go here, this is for the 22nd. So right here, off open, what happened? We dumped right to this 50 SMA. I got a terrible entry on this, by the way. Terrible. You guys know, if you guys are in the Discord, terrible entry. I got in at 250. So that was all the way up in here just because by the time I looked at this chart and I pulled up my option chain to take an entry, I didn't even notice that the contracts ended up bouncing so much. But we got our entry at 250. And, you know, if you bought down in here, I was down like 20 to 30% at one point. So, you know, you guys would have got way better entry than me. I think even after I called it out, the contracts already dipped. So you guys probably got a way better entry than me. But we ended up selling this for like 90 some percent. That's where I exited most out. I didn't take any trims up until we got that big move for like 90%. So this is a screenshot I have of the trade. This is it went over 100% by the close, just so you guys know. But 92%, you know, that's where I took a majority off at. Can't really complain. It's a very simple concept, man. We're just playing this cross on the 30-minute, or not even the cross. We're playing this 50 dip. You guys know this 50 SMA is a major support area, and you know, when we're cross, you buy the dips. And then when we look at the higher time frames, it's also aligned. You can see what's going on here. We dipped to that 1 hour 50, which aligned with the 30-minute 50, and then the 2 hour, same thing, and then the 4 hour, same thing. I mean, all that big dip in the morning was right into key support. The 4 hour chart was just crossing, and we got a mass move out of this. Contracts peaked at 530 from 250. Obviously, you guys could have got a way better entry than me, because as soon as I called it out, it was pretty much the dead top. And you know, we ended up pulling back a bit, which I didn't even notice. Like I said, when I was entering the contracts, we bounced pretty quickly. So you know, by the time I entered, it bounced a little bit. So the entry wasn't ideal, but we still were able to catch 92%, or actually over 100% on these by the close. So yeah, I mean, this was an A+ setup. This is where, you know, these are the trades you want to be looking for when we're getting that cross. You know, not even the cross. You know, just this 50 dip. You can see 30-minute 50. Okay, then when we look at the higher time frames, you know, it's the same thing. That 1 hour 50 is right there. The 2 hour 50 is right there. You know, everything on the higher time frames are aligning, and these are the A+ setups you want to be taking. Like, if you could find one of these a day, or even just like, you know, 1 or 2 a week, and you just look for this type of setup, you're going to be catching some good moves. Because, you know, I'm not looking to sell anything for like at least 50 to 60%. I was expecting a larger move on this, just because the 4 hour chart was crossing. So, you know, that's why I did end up holding this for a pretty big move, 92%. I mean, I usually don't hold my full position that long. Usually I just take a trim between 50 and 70, but I love this chart, and the 4 hour chart was crossing. It looked really good, and you know, that was that. I mean, this was a beautiful setup. And then when we pulled the monthly chart, there was no daily 50 here on the monthly contracts, but we did have this 4 hour chart crossing as well, so that kind of added some confluence to the trade, and you know, we ended up ripping higher. So, you know, these are the trades we want to be looking for. When I'm looking for a really good setup, this is the criteria I'm looking for. So, you know, we have that 30-minute 50 dip. Okay, when we look at the higher time frames, we got the 1 hour chart that's crossed, 2 hour chart that's crossed, 4 hour chart is just crossing. When we get that initial cross on the 4 hour time frame, that's, you know, I'm expecting a solid move, because the 4 hour time frame, it's a larger time frame. And then, you know, we have this, you know, the 4 hour chart crossing here on the monthlies as well. Ideally, you know, you'd want this daily chart to be crossing, just like we were looking at Intel for that daily chart, setting up for a cross. But all that's, like, sometimes you won't have the daily 50 there, it just won't, you know, be on the chart, and that'll happen. So at that point, I look at the 4 hour, and you know, since we had this crossing as well, really good setup. Even if there wasn't a 4 hour 50 here, I'd still take the trade. It's still an A+ setup. Weekly contracts crossing on all the time frames, at major support on all the time frames. You know, that's a setup you want to be taking any day of the week. So TEM, really good setup. I ended up closing out U for a loss this morning. Very unfortunate, because this ended up ripping over 100%. So if I pull up U really quickly, again, thesis I went over this last couple of videos. It's pretty simple. Daily chart on the monthlies are crossed. You can see we recaptured that 10 SMA and the 50 SMA on 8/12, and then, you know, we had these consecutive green days on these contracts. But when we pull up the weeklies, the reason I did close it was because, you know, it wasn't looking great. So weeklies here on the 30-minute. You can see what happened. So right off open, this is where we were. It just didn't look good. I mean, the first 30-minute candle ended up closing below the 50. The 50, it was hard to tell what the 50 was looking like because it looked like it was curling down a tiny bit. And then we had this massive green candle here at 10, which ended up sending us in these contracts. Ended up hitting 131. And our original fill, or my average up fill on this was 0.65. So unfortunately, I ended up closing this for a small loss. I think the contracts were like 0.60 when I closed them. So pretty much a 10% loss on you. This trade did run us, I think over 100% at one point. So or 98%, whatever it was. These contracts were at. 110. So we were up over 100% at one point because my original entry on this was 0.55 when we bought this 50 SMA dip down in here, and then we got this little rip here, and it just got very choppy in this area. When we looked at the higher time frames, you could see bounced right off the 1 hour 50. We shot up, and then there was actually a 4 hour 50 SMA that we hit. We actually hit this on the next, I think the 1 o'clock candle. So after this candle ended up forming, I'm pretty sure at 1 o'clock this is where the 50 SMA ended up appearing. So in hindsight, I mean, you don't really know that's going to happen, so you can't really say you should have sold on that rip. But I mean, you're up over 100% at that point. That'd be a spot. Obviously, I'd be trimming it up on this move up in here, but again, we sold that for like a 10% loss, is what it is. I also closed RGTI. I think that was another like small loss of, I couldn't even tell you, I forget what I closed it at, maybe like 15%. So RGTI, those are two really small losses. I mean, we ended up catching like net, we were green on the trade because I ended up averaging up and then closing it this morning. So like I said, we caught this initial 100-some% move. I bought this dip to the 50, and on Friday we ended up holding this. It just funky looking chart right in here, and we closed it this morning for a loss before it ripped. So and then I also closed shop. That was actually a swing that I did take for, this is actually a bigger loss, like 60%. I wasn't sized too heavy on it, so thankfully, what really wasn't that much of a loss when it comes to like the account size, just because I just had one contract, so that was a smaller trade for me. But for shop, I'll go over it real quick. I mean, we go to the where is this? We pull up shop. It was pretty simple. I mean, just monthly time frame. You could see what happened. We ended up getting this dip down in here to the 50, and I got this swing last week. So these weren't the exact contracts we were watching. We actually had I think the 155s last week. So the 50 SMA actually was a bit higher on the other contracts, and when we got these contracts, the 50 SMA was lower, so there was more room to drop to it. I mean, shop still looks really good for a swing, I'm not gonna lie. We pulled back to the 50 today, hit it pretty much to a T, and bounced like 20% on these contracts. I mean, shop is still really good looking setup. Wouldn't be opposed to taking a swing on this, but I just closed it today. Is what it is. It was. I mean, we're already down 60% at that point. Like I just didn't feel like holding it. I think I actually closed it for like 55. But yeah, that's pretty much a recap of all the trades that we took. We took shop for an L, 60%. We closed out U for 5% or 10%, whatever it was, and then RGTI. So we ended up closing all those swings, and then we caught TEM today for 92%. That's where we trimmed, and then in a close it ended up pumping up over, I think, like 110% total so far. So yeah, that's what we did today. Very, very simple day. Tomorrow I really don't have anything on watch that looks great at the moment. If you pull up Apple, I've been going over this a million times every video, but it's a good looking setup. We go on the daily chart here on the monthlies. What's happening? Just crossing here. So 10 SMA is crossing the 50. Again, I would love if we got a dip on Apple, buy this 50 SMA. 100%. That's a trade you want to take. So that's a freebie. Buy this 50 dip right here if we hit it for a few weeks out, or if we go here on the 30-minute chart. If this chart crosses on the 30-minute, then that's where you grab the nearest Friday expiration and take a nice trade on this, because we may not come all the way to 50 on the monthlies, and then in that case you wait for this chart to cross, and then that's where you'll get your entry points. So 2 entry points, just gotta wait for one of them to hit, and that'll be that. So that's what we did today. If you guys want to learn, join the Discord down below. It's where all the trades are shared, all the knowledge on the systems in there. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm out. Peace.